Welcome to That's Rad Life, Love, and Wedding Planning in the Pacific Northwest, where our goal is to educate and elevate. I am Radhika, planner and owner of Radications, and today I am joined by Cecilia Penner from All Seasons Weddings, one of the many talented officiants here in Victoria, BC. Welcome to the show, Cecilia. Thank you for taking the
Oh, thank you
time.
so much. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks, Rad.
And you're joining us from Quench today?
I am at Club Quench, the co-working space, and this is a whole new experience for me. It's very interesting to be here. It's a beautiful space.
It definitely is. That yellow couch is something.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's a bit noisy out there, so I'm tucked in a little room all by myself.
Well, we can't really hear much. We can hear you, though.
Ah, it's good.
So, how is your day?
Good. Found a parking spot. Life is
There's
good.
always lucky in downtown Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to get right into it because I know it's wedding season and we're all so busy. But can you tell me more about what led you to where you are today?
Well, weddings and little girls, right? It's always been a thing. So I was raised in a faith-based household, and so we always went to church and Sunday school and all of that. And it was always very exciting on a Sunday when there was still confetti on the church steps. And so, lots of questions about that. And I had never been to a wedding. I had no opportunity to go. So it wasn't until actually I was in my 20s that I actually did go to a wedding. But I was always just fascinated with the whole concept of the dress and, the things that you saw on TV about the pomp and the ceremony and everything. And I thought that would be really cool. I come from a family of ministers as well. So, there was lots of conversation about how you do things in the church and the structure of things and so on like that. Never any pressure to follow suit or anything like that. But I just, it's always sort of been at the back of my mind. The first wedding that I went to was actually a really, really big disappointment in terms of the ceremony. I mean, the rest of it was really fun. But the ceremony was about the church and it was not about the couple. I felt so kind of bereft for the couple that nothing that was spoken was about them and about their love and that kind of thing. And I always sort of had this, oh, I could do better than that kind of feeling, which is a little bit arrogant, but when you're 20, whatever. So, and at that time, you couldn't do weddings unless you were ordained in a church and, you had a congregation and that sort of thing. And so, then you get on with life. I was a teacher for many years. And so that in many ways kind of satisfied the presentation component of what I felt I had as a gift to offer. And there was enough ceremony with graduations and other events and, assemblies honoring this and that, that it sort of fulfilled a need that way. I always loved the graduation. I taught high school, so high school graduation's a pretty big thing. So that was really fun. Um, when when I moved to BC, I was in Ontario for most of my career, but when we moved to BC, there was the whole thing about marriage commissioners, which I had never heard of before. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And again, another disappointment, you had to be retired. You also had to pass a handwriting test. So strike two, I was out. And it was just, I thought it was a ridiculous thing, but whatever. Nobody appreciates my opinion about the marriage commissioner application process. So when I did retire, I thought this would be my opportunity. And I'm not quite sure what happened that I got kind of off in a different direction into officiating rather than being a marriage commissioner. And I'm so glad that I found out about that because there's a whole lot more scope for individuality and customization and so on. So that was really, really a lovely thing to be able to get into. I found All Seasons Weddings. I didn't know of any others and I didn't know any other way to get in. And so I thought, oh, well, that would be good. And so, as they say, the rest is history.
Well, I'm so glad that you found that. And I love that it started at such a young age, too, in a different way that you were focusing so much on the ceremony.
Yes. Yeah. I, you know, Like I always say to couples, like we are hardwired for ceremony and ritual. And there's something about the predictability, but with little variations and, and that sort of thing. Like we love it. We need it.
You've touched on the marriage commissioner, and what's the difference between working with someone like you or a marriage commissioner?
So a marriage commissioner is hired by the government. They have a very set script, which is the civil ceremony. Now, recently they've allowed officiants to, or sorry, they've allowed marriage commissioners to be able to do some customization, and they get paid a minimal amount to be able to make customizations. However, they don't provide any training for the commissioners as to what they could include. So it's pretty much up to them to decide or up to the couples to ask for things. Marriage commissioners don't make as much money as officiants and celebrants do, which is fair enough. They're expected to do as many ceremonies in a day as they possibly can, given their geographical jurisdiction, which is quite limited. And if they are doing a ceremony outside of their jurisdiction, they have to ask for permission from the commissioners who are there. So it's a bit of a process. The geographical limitations are surprising in some ways, but it is the system that it is, and Vital Statistics has its rules for setting that up. An officiant is affiliated with another organization. We are loosely clergy. And so, because you either have to be a government official or clergy to officiate, so we all have some affiliation with some sort of a spiritually based organization. Whether or not we include any of that is completely up to the celebrants. Do a little bit of a different take on things. Their ceremonies tend to be a little bit longer, much more detailed, kind of very, very personal. I'm sort of the middle of the road between the celebrant ceremony and a marriage commissioner, where there is a lot of personalization. There's a certain template with the different elements of the ceremony that can be included or not, depending on what the couple wants. But there is very definitely the personalization component, which is what I think makes it a little bit more of a heartwarming choice.
Yes, and I very much appreciate when a couple hires an officiant or a celebrant, as opposed to a marriage commissioner. No hate out there to the marriage commissioners. It's just I find that the ceremony then gets the attention that it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you find this, but do you find sometimes that the ceremony is the part that people just want to get over with and move on to the reception?
Yeah, I think so for the most part. However, I think that's changing a little bit, and certainly the pandemic had a lot to do with that because there was nothing else that you could do except the ceremony. There was no gathering, there was no dance or anything like that. And so people started to realize, yeah, we can make the ceremony really count and we can engage with the ceremony in a much more personal way. I think there's sort of a lot of historical carryover where the ceremony in the church was just the ticket to the party, basically. And a lot of people didn't even bother going to the church. I was always surprised when there would be maybe 40 people at the church and 200 people at the dinner and reception. Like, what is, how is that even fair? Like you're there to get married, and the married part is the part that happens in the ceremony. So, but my faith is restored, Rad, because I had contact with a couple this week, and I was, chatting with them about stuff and said, and who are your other vendors? Because usually I'm like sixth or seventh on the list, if not last. And so they said, oh, we haven't booked anybody else because we figured the officiant is the most important because without you, it's not a wedding. And I thought, oh, I love you already. Like, this is wonderful. That was so refreshing and just kind of gave me a little bit of a boost, to get through another busy season, that somebody really gets it.
Yes, and that's so nice. I know I always am saying if there's no ceremony, then we're just throwing a party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's nice to have that recognition. Yeah.
Definitely. So do you feel like there's something that maybe couples gloss over when they're planning their ceremony?
They don't they don't tend to focus on sort of the welcoming and the setting the tone and telling everybody like we are gathered and we are gathered with intention, we are gathered with attention, we're here for a purpose. You're here because you were invited because you mean something to the people and your support is important to them. And I've had a number of couples when they get to look at the script just say, yeah, can we scrap all that? We just want to get to the I do question, the vows, the rings, and then we're out of here. And I think it sort of leaves a bit of a gap.
I feel that for sure. We've been having that conversation with some of our couples from this year where they're doing custom ceremonies and they're having a friend or a family member officiate. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely finding that the explanation piece seems to be something that is off to the side, and it's more of the let's get to the basics, the structure of the house essentially, instead of like
Yeah,
the foundation.
exactly. Yeah. And it's people want to feel like their presence is important, and they need to feel like they are part of the ceremony. Their presence, their attention, their involvement is super important to the whole process.
Oh, I think so.
And that sort of gets down to the whole purpose of ritual and ceremony, and that is that we all feel like there's some kind of a transformation that's taken place. We come in with expectations, we go through we go through all the things, and then we leave with a different feeling. We are feeling more fulfilled, or we are feeling enriched, or we are feeling just feeling the love, of everything. It's just that transformation component is a really, really lovely part of
It
it.
really is. So I want to ask, with all the trends that are happening now and like with everybody getting like this wedding dysmorphia almost, do you find that authenticity is sometimes lacking, or do you find that people struggle with how they make the ceremony most authentic to them?
A degree. I think they don't really fully understand the extent to which they can make it authentic.
Hmm.
Person. That there are many, many things that can be incorporated into the ceremony, and that there is really no set recipe anymore. We have one legal question that has to be asked, and that is not the question of impediment, because that's gone now. That is the does anybody object thing. And people don't understand that that's just not a thing anymore. And actually, for us, for people of the clergy, it's just been 2 years that we didn't have to ask. However, I think in the civil ceremony, they still say, as part of what you say is, I know of no lawful impediment as to why I can't marry this person. So that's a lot of big words. You're really excited and saying all those things about inalienable rights and things like that. Like it's a bit of a stumper on a highly emotional day. So I think that understanding that whatever is important to you could be included in the ceremony is a really, really necessary for couples to take the time to explore. For example, having their pets, having children, doing any kind of a unity ceremony, or a faith-based or a cultural ritual that they like to include.
Yes, and I know that well, she's a celebrant, Barbara, was mentioning the
Mhm.
coffee that her couple combined for their unity ceremony, and I really loved that.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea to do that. Yeah. Hmm.
Have you seen anything interesting like that, and that sticks out to you over the years?
Well, there have been many things. A lot of people have done hand fasting. And, everybody says, oh, yeah, everybody's seen a hand fasting, tying the knots and everything. But there can be some really cool elements to that too. People have hand dyed or eco dyed strips of fabric, and it's especially a cool thing for blended families, because then what I've seen done a few times is every child and the parents each get a ribbon, they're draped over the hands, everything is tied together to symbolize the joining, not just of the couple in marriage, but of the two families in this marriage. And that's a really, really nice way to involve everybody, and also makes it very, very personal. And so in the script, I like to say, these strips of fabric were created, however they were done. There was a couple whose one mother was in Germany, one mother was here, and so they had never met each other in person. They embroidered a hand fasting cloth together to represent the two kids. When they got together, like a week or so before the wedding, it was stitched together. So there was this beautiful, ornate hand fasting band that was used in the ceremony. And so we told a little story about how that came to be and what the symbolism was. And it was extraordinary. It really was. Like everybody was just going, oh, like it really meant something a little bit more, than just tying a knot.
That's giving me
So
goosebumps.
yeah, it was really, really neat. But the sweetest one was a little tiny dog carried a hand fasting cord, which was rope from one of the Navy vessels, because both of the parties getting married were in the Navy. And this was a ship that they had each sailed on, but not together. And so they took a piece of like 2 meters of the rope from the vessel, and the little dog carried it up to them in the ceremony. And that was just like, everybody was so crazy about that. It was just really, really wonderful.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really neat. And with the sand ceremony, like everybody kind of rolls around and says, oh, sand ceremony, but thank God for Etsy and the creators on Etsy, because you can get beautiful bespoke vessels to put the sand in. And of course, here we are so blessed because we have so many beaches that sand can be collected from. And, it's a really cool thing to have like sand from Prince Edward Island and sand from Vancouver Island blended together just to acknowledge the heritage. And uh, all of that can't be separated stuff that is part of that script, but it's just so cool to be able to add such a personal element and be able to explain it to people so they really understand, and they're not thinking it's just well, we're just paying lip service to having a ceremony within the ceremony type of thing. It's not that at all. So but there have been some very, very unique ones too. So
Yeah.
um I think that there was one wedding that I did where we did some Jewish customs. Like the ceremony took place under a huppah, which is a canopy that has symbolism. The couple had the ketubah, which is the Jewish marriage contract, read, and then they did the stomping of the glass afterwards. And so that was really, really fun. And it's so lovely to be able to explain those things, because sometimes even the people born into that faith no longer practice those traditions, and so it's new to them too, and it's exciting for them to hear about it so that they do the honoring. Anytime that you can include anything of heritage, I think is a really special thing. I've done modifications of the Saptapadi, which is the 7 steps or the 7 circles in Hindu ceremony, and that's a very, very cool thing to do with the 7 blessings spoken at each along the way. And a further thing that's very nice to do is to take the script for that and have 7 people each read a section as the couple does the action for that, and that's very meaningful. We've done an exchange of garlands after the signing to kind of seal the deal, and that was something that nobody had ever seen before of the people who were there, like of the Canadians who were there. And so that was a very, very enriching, kind of beautiful thing to see, because we just don't know about some of these things.
Definitely. And with that, if with these traditions, have you encouraged couples to make them their own, or have they just wanted to do that themselves?
I don't understand quite what
Oh,
you mean.
sorry. So with these traditions, the couples want to incorporate them themselves, or do they want to change them in any way?
Oh, Oh, I see. A little bit of both. Sometimes they just don't know what they could do and what some of the options are. For example, this garland thing, the one of the parties had no idea about that, and the other just didn't think to mention it because there were so many other things going on. But I thought, well, this would just be a lovely, lovely thing to do. And so sometimes I think just like saying you can do whatever you want isn't enough. You have to just offer some opportunities and send people to Google to look up different things and to put certain qualifiers in front of unity ceremonies, like not just unity ceremonies, but unique or offbeat or unusual unity ceremonies, or something like that that will get them to a place. And then often once they see things, they realize, oh, okay, well, we could do this because that would make it really meaningful for us, and that's really neat. I encourage people to talk to their grandparents, their parents, and say, what did you do at your wedding? Is there anything that you might like us to include? And, would you consider allowing us to do that as part of our ceremony? Because there are lots of conversations and opinions that happen around wedding planning, as we know. And so it's nice to, I guess, kind of take control of that and do the asking rather than waiting for them to ask if they're allowed to do something, parents and grandparents and other relatives and so on. So if you do a bit of research and take some initiative with that, I think it makes the process a lot smoother.
Definitely. And have you ever had a wedding where there was several languages or two languages involved?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Um, I am not bilingual in anything. So I have worked with an interpreter where I've done the ceremony in English. And as I spoke the words, they were spoken in Vietnamese because the couple had no Vietnamese or no English rather. And so that was really, really cool. And it was very special to kind of hear those words in Vietnamese as well. And sometimes there was no translation, so it had to be in English. But I mean, for the most part, the sentiment is definitely there. And I had actually helped the translator out a little bit by going to Google Translate and translating the whole ceremony into Vietnamese. And so he basically just had to edit it and put it in like language that is actually used, not what Google thinks Vietnamese is. So, but that was a really cool process. When sometimes when like parents have not they're not strong in that language, the couple has been given the script ahead of time, they translate it for their parents and the parents follow along as we go. And that is just a really lovely thing, I think, to do as well. There's no, simultaneous translating caption or anything like that we can do, but it's a lovely, lovely thing to do. And so I'll talk about my nephew and his wife because I don't think they'll mind. So she is French Canadian, he is not. And so when they married, she said, I need to do something to kind of keep the peace with the French Canadian component. And so they wrote their vows together and they spoke them line by line. He said it in English, she said it in French. And it was beautiful. And so couples have done that in other languages as well, Hindi and English, English and Portuguese, English and Spanish. Like there's something about saying those words in your own language where you can really put your heart into it. And so that is something. And if they if they want to do personal vows in, whatever language they have in common, they can certainly do that, but they could do that at their first look, or they can do that privately after the ceremony. But for your guests who are there to hear you speak your vows, it's nice to hear it in both languages, and then everybody's.
Really glad that you mentioned the option of sharing vows at another time because I know a lot of couples have that pressure of, oh, I have to think about
Mhm.
saying this in front of everybody, and maybe I don't want to say everything I want to say in front of all of our guests.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And doing vows at first look, I think is very common.
I think it's becoming more and more common. And I've even
Hmm.
noticed some couples are opting for family vows. So they're saying them in front of their wedding party and their family because
Oh,
they're
nice.
really,
Yeah.
those people were really important to their story.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. That's a great idea.
We just did that last year. It was the first for me. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's great.
So I know that the wedding industry has a long way to go when it comes to inclusion. And one of those groups is the LGBTQIA 2S plus. I wanted to make sure I got that right. What do you
Hmm.
think needs to be done differently in the industry to create a sense of more belonging?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to say that here anyway, and especially on the island, we're really, really lovely with all these variations of couples. You know, in terms of delivering the ceremony, in terms of celebrating, doing all of the, the decor and the reception and the DJs and all of that stuff. Like everybody is very, very open. We are required by law to deliver ceremonies to any couple who wants it. If they are legally free to marry, it's up to us to do that. And it's only people who are like clergy affiliated with the church that they can deny, that community a marriage ceremony. So the rest of us are obligated to deliver the ceremony. I know there are some vendors that choose not to serve that population, and that is their choice. And there's certainly lots of opportunity for people to choose other people who are more inclusive. However, overall, I think the wedding industry needs to get on board with gender neutral language. Everything is bridegroom oriented and bridesmaids and groomsmen. And I think that calling the couple marriers and calling the attendants or just the wedding party, people of honor, men of honor, women of honor, if you want to, break it down even further. But I think that that would be something that would be far more important, is just to keep the gender out of it. Yes, you're a bride. However, you can be wearing a gown and you could be non-binary. You can be wearing a tuxedo and identify as female. We have to just break away from that a little bit and just be two people getting married.
It's very interesting you say that because I know one of our couples for next year, they were telling me that they had gone to a wedding show and they found that some vendors were surprised that they were together and it kind of was a little off-putting for them. And I know even when
Yes.
we do interviews sometimes on this podcast, I hear the gendered language and it's always something that I'm like, okay, we definitely still have some work to do.
Mm. Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. It's like everything else that's different. It is uncomfortable, but this is the 21st century. The laws in Canada are, inclusion. And so we just have to work, I think, a little bit harder and a bit more consistently. And it's okay to, oops, I just kicked my table. It's okay to make mistakes, but you just say, "Oh, I know that that was wrong. Okay, let me correct that and move on." It's especially hard for people of my generation. Like I am a boomer, and the they them pronoun is awkward because I had grammar drilled into me as a kid in school, and they them is plural. And so it's a shift, and it takes concentration and it takes effort to do that. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get into it and to be a whole lot more, to feel more fluid with it, and to feel more comfortable. When you meet someone who is non-binary and you get to know them a little bit, it's perfect, and I always like to say, like, I will struggle and correct me, stop me, make me say it again because I have to learn. And I'm very, very open to that. Like, I don't, doesn't make any difference to me to be corrected. So it's a really, really important thing. I don't know if any wedding vendors have ever had a booth at the Pride Festival. It was something I wanted All Seasons Weddings to do, but it wasn't it wasn't on their radar to do for this year, but I'm hoping maybe for next year we can have an officiant booth at Pride, because I think that would be pretty cool
Hey,
to
maybe we
do that.
can
And just, yeah.
maybe we can do it together.
Well, it would be fabulous to do that because it's just, why not? Like there are tattoo booths, there are all kinds of other things there. Like we should be present because it is couples in the LGBTQ, all the other letters and numbers community, they want to be married as well. They want the commitment. It's legal. Why not?
Definitely. And I feel like it's going to be like that, what you said, the learning, the relearning
Hmm.
of how to address people the way that they want to, because I, like you, also have the same thing with the they, them. It was drilled into me, and
Yes.
I'm finding that people are even extending it to like when we're out with our son and when he was younger and they couldn't tell what if he was a boy or girl, they would just say, and
Mhm.
what's their name? And I really liked that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, keeping in mind all of that, I think that would be the biggest thing. And the publications at the wedding shows are so oriented to bride and groom. And I don't know. Yeah, we need to do better overall, I think.
Definitely. It's a work in
Hmm.
progress, and that's
It is.
why
Yep.
we have people like you that are talking about it.
Well, thank you. That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
So, on that note, are there any books that you would recommend couples or wedding vendors read to get a better understanding of themselves or and how they make decisions for the day or how they approach the wedding planning process?
I have a pile of books underneath my laptop here, so I'm going to try to pull them out and
Okay.
not make too much disturbance. The most important one in my life is this one, and The Art of Gathering. And Priya Parker is just a brilliant gatherer. And she has so many incredible um, pieces of advice and sort of strategies for making every gathering something that is really memorable. And it basically comes down to setting the intention for the gathering, having a welcome, and fulfilling the purpose, and then having a proper goodbye, because a lot of times we miss some of those elements. We don't have a good enough welcome, a good enough statement of intention, and often there just isn't a proper wrap up, which I think is what a lot of people feel, in any setting, not just a wedding, but that it's just like, oh, that sort of ended a bit flat, and the send off should be just as dramatic as the starting. So she has some really, really good ideas. I follow her on Instagram, and she's so funny, and she just has some of the best ideas for like regular everyday life, which is just really nice. So that would be the first one. Okay. Sorry, this is just going to be a little bit
No,
awkward
that's
here.
okay.
This is another one, The Power of Ritual. And it is an incredibly interesting book for understanding about what I mentioned before about how we're hardwired for ritual and the need that it fulfills in us. For couples, I would recommend this, and I got this just from Amazon. This fellow, JP Reynolds, I followed a podcast that he was on. The podcast isn't around anymore, but the episodes are archived. But this book is available on Amazon, and you can get it as just I think, a PDF, a downloadable ebook as
And
well.
that book
But
is
it's how to write your
How to
vows.
Write Your Vows. Yeah. We've got a great
Yeah, and
podcast episode
that's
on that too, actually.
yes, yes, indeed, you certainly did. It is a really, really good. It's a good starter, for that. Or listen to the podcast, and you don't have to pay anything. So that's good. Another book that I just got recently is this one, The Next Conversation by Jefferson Fisher. He is a guy who I have been following on Instagram for a while, and he's a lawyer. And he has some really good ideas about how to get out of some really awkward situations. And one of the parts that I found most interesting was how to say no to people. because I know that this is something that a lot of couples really struggle with, is how to say no, how to put limits on what's happening for your wedding. For example, no children. Because a lot of people, they want an adult event. They either don't have kids themselves, or maybe they do and they want to just do an adult celebration without children involved. And so he's got some really good strategies. And the one that I've just been hanging on to is, I know I'm going to disappoint you by saying this. However, we are not having children at our wedding. And so, right away, you're sort of setting things up by saying, I know there's an emotional connection, and I know you're not going to be happy with this, but we're doing it anyway. And he also, he's very clear about not saying the word but. You say something else like however or and. I know I'm going to disappoint you with this, and I'm telling you we're not having children, or I'm telling you it's a dry wedding.
See, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to dig into that more,
Mm-hmm.
like psychologically.
It's just a way, because it's your day, you're paying
Hmm.
for it. And so, it's just, I think it's really necessary for people to have good tools to be able to communicate their wishes in such a way that it just cuts the drama.
I mean, I'm gonna tell that to everybody now when they're struggling with something.
Well, give him a follow on
Yeah,
Instagram, Jefferson Fisher. He's so interesting, and he's just a lovely, lovely man.
wonderful. Cecilia,
Hmm.
thank you so much. I'm gonna end off our chat today with a little game, and it's going to be pitching the perfect wedding because I know you've been at so many of them. So I thought,
Mm.
why not have you come up with your own scenario? So I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock, and you have to come up with a wedding that has a rainforest venue, a couple that's allergic to flowers, like all of them, a budget of $5,000, and a cat as the ring bearer.
Okay, I before we start the clock,
Yes.
I just want to say I don't know how much venues cost.
Okay.
So I like I on that's not a question I ever ask anybody. How much are you paying for this place? Because I think that's kind of rude to ask. It's also none of my business. So I just not go into the rainforest or go into the budget part of it?
Of
Because
course.
yeah,
Yes.
okay, because I need to just miss that.
Okay,
Do
then
you want to throw something
I'm
else
gonna
in?
throw in the officiant has lost their voice.
Oh no, that's not fair. Then I would give my script to someone else to read out loud. No, okay, so no, well, okay.
Just let me know
Hmm.
when you want
We'll
to start.
go, okay, we'll stick with the $5,000
Okay,
budget.
sounds good.
Okay. Okay. All right, ready, go.
Okay.
Here we are meeting in the forest at Royal Roads University on one of the walking trails. We haven't told anybody that we're walking through the campus. We're going to just tuck into this little grove here, and we're going to have our ceremony with the big, beautiful trees. Someone has very wisely brought a Bluetooth speaker and their phone and is playing magnificent music that is going to draw the rest of the guests down the path to the spot where we are gathered. We don't need to have any blossoms. The bride is, oh, here I go again. The one marrier is carrying a bouquet, and the bouquet is made of ferns and lovely little berries. So there's not a grain of pollen to be found in the bouquet. The music is recognizable, it's loud, it brings everybody forward, and it sets the tone. Someone is carrying a cat basket, and in the basket is a little Sphinx cat wearing a bridesmaid dress, a little flower girl bridesmaid kind of dress. And the cat has a collar on it with a beautiful leather pouch crafted from a creator on Etsy, and the rings are in there. When it's time for the rings, the person carrying the cat carrier will bring the cat forward and we'll retrieve the rings from there.
That's
How did we do?
that's great. A little bit over a
Okay.
minute, but I
Okay.
want to know how somebody gets the cat into an outfit. My cat would have never.
I think you have to start when they're kittens, dressing them up. I've done now about 5 weddings where cats have been present, and it's all gone well, except for one escape. It's gone pretty well.
That's
So
phenomenal.
I would never have thought, but people are putting their cats in harnesses when they're little and taking them out for walks and doing all that stuff. So can be done.
Yeah, I guess you could call it meow-tastic.
Okay, that sounds great. I love dogs at weddings, though. They are a lot more fun and a little bit more predictable.
Yes, that is true.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to thank you for your time, Cecilia. I really appreciate you being here. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can they find out more?
All Seasons Weddings. I'm there as one of the officiants in the Victoria area. On Instagram at Vancouver Island Wedding Lady.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, and I'm sure we'll see
Oh,
you
thank
this
you.
season.
I hope so. Take good care. Thanks so much,
Thank
Rad.
you.
Oh, and listen,
Mm.
congratulations on 10 years in the business.
Thank
This
you.
is huge. First of all, you lasted 10 years. And secondly, you just make such significant contributions to the Vancouver Island wedding professionals as a whole organization. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Cecilia. That means a lot.
My
All
pleasure.
right. Until next time, thank you.
Bye bye now.
I hope that gave you some food for thought when it comes to your ceremony and the traditions that you want to incorporate. We will see you here again next week with another guest and great conversation. And in the meantime, stay rad.
Can you get into the funk tonight? Can you stomp to the beat and sway to the right? Can you feel it deep down in your soul? Can you dance to the rhythm and lose control? Can you let it move you? Let it choose you. Get in the funk and the funk will flow through you. Up and down, you'll be bouncing like a yo-yo, feeling frisky, dancing like a disco. Let's get up and dance.